Sky High is, in my opinion, a fantastic movie about superheroes. It's a campy, fun time with a simple yet wacky story. However, I always longed for two things regarding this cult classic. One is obviously sequel movies following our group of misfit sidekicks as they discover that it's not the power one has that makes a hero, but the person. And two, a comic book series. After all, the movie does start out with a comic book sequence, so after watching this film as a kid, I fully expected there to be a comic I can read. Unfortunately, that never happened. But just like my other video where I tried to remaster Avatar, and don't worry, I do plan on making more videos regarding that as well, I decided to give this comic making a try as a gift for 9-year-old me. But quick disclaimer, I don't consider myself to be that great at drawing. Besides working on the Avatar remaster videos and drawing these figures of myself during the inception of my channel, I actually haven't drawn in years. I wanted to reinvigorate my love for drawing that I had as a kid. I would spend countless hours drawing when I should have been studying, doodling when I should have been paying attention in class, and all of my bad grades can't have been for nothing, right? The scenes I'm hoping to tackle take place in the beginning of the movie. Our characters Will and Layla are on their way to school where they wait for and get on a bus. On this bus, they meet characters like Ron Wilson, Sky High bus driver, Ethan, Magenta, and Zach. Oh, and I can't forget about the absolute Chad, Larry. So without further ado, please give this video a like if you had fun watching, subscribe if you want to see more content, and most importantly, please enjoy. To start, I wanted to make very rough sketches to lay out the story pretty quickly. I used the manga layout tool from Clip Studio Paint to get these boxes all laid out, which I didn't expect. It definitely made the setup very simple. I've never made a comic before, so I'm expecting to run into a lot of issues due to my many weaknesses. Some of which are:
I work too hard, I care too much, and sometimes I can be too invested in my job.
Going back to this sketch, I decided that 9 pages would be good enough to recreate the scenes from the movie. This rough sketch is, as the name applies, very rough. I don't expect this to look great as I'm mainly using all of this as a reference and outline. To avoid the monotony, you can see that I attempted to use different layouts for each page. I also wrote down the dialogue for each frame to tie everything together. The goal for this project was to keep most of the dialogue and charm from the original movie while making sure everything still felt like a graphic novel. And it's also good to note that I ended up making a lot, and I mean a lot of changes throughout this whole process. So what you see here in the beginning, and even near the end if I'm going to be honest, isn't indicative of what the final product will look like. I also contemplated trying to recreate the comic style from the movie, but I ultimately decided to stick with my own style as I have a lot to learn before I'm
ready to save anyone.
Before I'm ready to mimic others. But anyways, here are the rough outline pages all laid out in page order. Once this rough outline was completed, I moved on ahead to create a rough inking with the actual speech bubbles. I ended up using the Clip Studio comic font as it looked the most appealing to me, and I initially thought this portion of the project was going to be very tedious, but I wasn't aware at how simple the bubble tool was to use in Clip Studio Paint. Honestly, the more I use this program, the more I find myself enjoying it quite a bit. The text, on the other hand, was a bit tedious because the font kept defaulting to another one, so having to change it each time was quite a bit annoying. However, I'm sure this is something I can fix if I dig a bit deeper in the settings. I know I struggle with basic foundational stuff like proportions, perspectives, and poses. Just realized they all start with the letter P. Anyways, what was I saying? Yeah, I never took actual classes growing up, and this is the reason I've been very insecure about my artwork. I would always compare whatever I do to what I would see from others, either in person or online, but I know that in order to progress, I need to get out of my comfort zone. Luckily, I'm enjoying this process so far, and I hope you're enjoying the video as well. Going through the rest of the pages, and we can see that I added another layer of inking on top of this rough ink layer because I honestly wasn't too happy with my initial inking attempts. Luckily, all of this is done digitally and not on paper because otherwise, call me Rick because I would be in quite a pickle. Is that a dated reference now? Let me know. I mentioned earlier that what you see in the rough sketch isn't indicative of the final product, and the first of many examples of that starts with this last page over here. Instead of drawing in yet another school bus, I wanted to try doing something a bit different, mainly because I'm not good at drawing school buses. I started this panel over and made a silhouette style panel to give it a cleaner look. I also added the students screaming in exhilaration to match their energy from the movie, and I also deleted the border around the school bus from the final frame of the comic because once I get to coloring the background, I wanted the sky to take over the entire page with the top panels popping out. Overall, I'm quite pleased with the decision so far. After the inking, I knew that I had to work on coloring the pages, and this is where I started to have a lot of difficulty. For those of you that don't know, which I'm assuming is many of you since I never mentioned it in any one of my previous videos, but I have this little thing called color blindness. Luckily, it's a pretty mild red-green color blindness, but unluckily, I'm also just very stupid when it comes to color, so that ended up being my most limiting factor. I was able to complete this portion of the comic making process thanks to my wonderful girlfriend who gave me feedback on which color to use and not to use, so shout out to her. But to get my feet wet with the colors, I started with the characters first. This allowed me to kind of not fully commit into each page, and also allowed me to mess with the different layer options like the multiply for shadows, and the overlay or screen options for lighting. The plan was to stick as close as possible to each character's color scheme from the movie. Luckily, they all have very distinct color schemes, the most obvious ones being Will and Layla as blue and green respectively. For Ron Wilson, I chose a light gray color option along with his orange bus driver hat. Ethan obviously is rocking an orange shirt in the movie, so I gave him just that. You don't really see too much of magenta here, but I did end up giving her streaks of purple in her hair, and Zach, I gave him a light yellow hair with a yellow shirt to match. Before moving on to the backgrounds, I took a look at the first page and found that I wasn't a fan of two aspects. The first one is about Will's hands, which I promptly fixed by using references. Thank goodness for Google Images, because otherwise I would probably be quite screwed. And second is the bottom panel. The school bus taking over two frames didn't really look right to me, and instead I wanted to be able to bridge the gap of both Will and Layla seeing the bus, and then to them meeting Ron Wilson, Sky High bus driver. I also didn't want to draw too much of the bus because, again, I'm not good at drawing school buses, so that's another reason why. I erased the last panel and drew the door of the school bus instead with a little shadowy silhouette of our favorite bus driver. I think this makes for a pretty decent transition. I promptly finished coloring the rest of this page, but that doesn't mean I was ready to move on. I didn't like how this third panel ended up turning out, so I pulled a Thanos and shredded this frame down to its last atom so I can create a new. Instead of having the bench placed in the foreground, I decided to move it to the background and have Mrs. Kibbage sit on it while Will and Layla walk by. I also tried using this boxier approach to making the outline of our characters, just to try to get the bodies to match the perspective of the environment. I read this online, but I'm not 100% sure if I did it correctly, but this is definitely a lot better than the previous attempt. Moving on to the next page, and I had another issue with one of the backgrounds. I must have been holding my drawing tablet at a Dutch angle because I don't know why I decided to make the window so tilted, but to remedy this situation, I used the straight line tool to give the window and the wall of the bus some more detail, and I was on my merry way to page 3. Here we have Ron, who just found out that Will's parents are the legendary heroes Commander and Jetstream. This empty space in the middle gave me a lot of trouble as I wasn't entirely sure how to fill the gap. After some thinking, I decided it might be best to put in the back of Will's head and to also use perspective lines to tidy up the seats. I felt the page was almost complete, albeit one minor change. I wanted the bottom panel to have more emphasis, so instead of making all the other panels smaller and this one bigger, I ended up just saying goodbye to the border around the last frame and expanded the image. I can't forget about the action lines and the gradients, and this third page is now completed. The fourth page thankfully was literally super easy. This one barely had anything going on in the background, so I just plopped down a blue, white, and gray background to break up the monotony. This wide shot of Ethan and Magenta in the next panel deserves a better background than just this one bus seat, so I added in the windows and other seats. For the other panels, there wasn't much that was needed besides adding a panel gap in the ceiling, so I did just that. And I'm moving on pretty quickly, but the sixth page is more of the same as I wanted to use this section of the comic as an exposition area. Besides the standalone bus seat here and there wasn't too much to add. I did alter the bottom panels a little bit however, and by a little bit I mean I completely changed the last panel. I actually made this change as I was editing this video, because I really wasn't a fan of it even after I thought I was done. Here's the latest edition. Instead of the prior image, we have Will and Zack making the same face that Zuko made when he stumbled upon Sokka in his tent. I don't know why, but I really like that face, so I incorporated it into the comic. And having Ron's chibi face as he exclaims sorry should do the same job with the addition of seeing the aftermath of the breaking on our characters' faces. And now we're moving on to the last third of our comic with page 7. Ron stopped the bus to pick up this student, so obviously I had to color in the sky for blue, the tree for brown, and the bus for yellow. In the movie, the student was wearing a red shirt with stripes, so I did my best to emulate it. I also wanted to mix things up with a background for the bottom panels, so I added variations of a black background. The first one had a bunch of action lines to indicate the lever being pulled. Then I added a flash bubble to the middle panel so the focus can go towards the badge on the hat. Stepping on by page 8, and I really regretted how Ron's eyes turned out. There's a certain unnerving quality to it, so I promptly changed them to make his appearance look a lot more friendly. I also wasn't a fan of the next frame. It wasn't too evident that the seatbelts got engaged, so I tried to change things up, which is so unlike me. Like any good fitness weight loss program, I decided to give a before and after panel. It's rather basic, but I think it gets the job done. And I never thought I'd reach the day, but I'm finally at the last page of this comic making process. I first finished the sky and added some clouds that encompassed the entire page. The clouds ended up having too much depth and didn't really fit the style of the art, so I flattened them. Of course I had to add a speech bubble of Chibi Ron saying freshman with a cheeky expression, and I thought I was finally finished. I thought. The first panel didn't look good enough for me, so I knew that something had to be done and that I needed to change it. I decided it might be better to stretch out the second frame and add in a second speech bubble to indicate the first frame. I didn't like having too many chibi faces, so I ended up deleting this one. I'm not really much one for consistency. And there we have it. After working on a bit of the fire behind the school bus, the final page of the comic is finally done with the coloring and the shading completed. Now it's time to showcase my work. The first frame has Will and Layla walking out of the house as Layla exclaimed how excited she is to save the world. There's some friendly banter, and on their journey together they see their neighbor sitting on a bench. And finally the bus is here to pick up our students, which they see is none other than Ron Wilson, Sky High bus driver. Will asks a pretty dumb question and he immediately gets shut down for speaking so loudly. Suspicious of the new passenger, Ron asks Will his name, to which Will responds, Will Stronghold. Excited to see that he's in the presence of the Stronghold family, he boldly exclaims to the bus who Will's parents are, which pretty much negates what he told to Will just a page before about being too loud. We then cut to Ron eagerly letting Will know to count on him, and he also tries to kick out Ethan and Magenta out of their seats so that Will can sit there. However, Ethan is more than happy to give up his seat, while Magenta really isn't. Will then shuts down any rumors of his relationship status with Layla, and poor Layla doubles down by saying they're pretty much like siblings. It was at this point that she gets the attention of Larry. A quick off-screen rejection later, and we have Will talking with his pal Zack about his summer. I had to cut some of the dialogue since this scene had quite a lot of it. Turns out Zack is quite the talker. We get our last student on the bus, and the tone shifts as Ron goes from bus driver to Sky High bus driver.
Next up, Sky High!
And finally the last page. We get a warning to hold on as they're going off-road quite literally. The last shot of this chapter shows the magic school bus, the Sky High school bus, soaring through the sky. And there you have it. Thanks so much for joining me on this process as I try to get better at art by making a comic of one of my favorite non-MCU superhero movies. I definitely had a lot of fun making this despite being quite mediocre at drawing in my opinion. The backgrounds, colors, poses, hands, feet, hands, poses, everything literally gave me so much difficulty, and looking back at it, I wish I had spent more time with the initial sketching, since that probably would have saved me a lot of the reworking I ended up having to do late in the process. That was definitely the most time-consuming part of it all, and another regret was not making these character design sheets for each character that was going to appear in this sequence. That would have let me have more consistency as it would have given me a reference to look back on, and I think it would have saved Ron Wilson because I think he looks different in each page he's in, and that's just my bad. I also need to work more on the perspective drawing and poses. I've never been good at any of that, so it was nice to get out of my comfort zone with this project. Colors again were another part, but I can go on and on. If I were to spend time listing out all of my weaknesses, then, well, I might still be recording this video. I'm still not 100% satisfied with this comic, but it got to a point where I couldn't stop fixing every little detail I noticed, and it felt like I was never going to get to a point where I can finish it, so I decided enough is enough, let me just stop what I'm doing and get on with editing the video. All in all, it was a great learning experience and a pretty fun time. Once again, please give this video a like if you had fun watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and most importantly, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.